How's it going, everyone? It's Elias here at the Rainy Forge. I'm in the new workshop, finally. Took absolutely ages, but I'm so happy to be here. I've been here for about 13 days or so now, and I'm just getting that machine running, getting the gears oiled, getting everything turning back into the swing of things. Just got back from an awesome rodeo out in Auburn, which is near me here in central New York. It was an awesome little 2-day show, and I did really good. So if any of you guys are watching, saw me there at the show, hi, welcome to the channel. So today, for a client of mine named Eddie, that I've done a knife before, and I told him that the next knife that I make for him, I do a video. So Eddie, here's your video, and here's what we're making. It's going to be an awesome little everyday carrier, black micarta handle scales, and it's going to be a nice acid wash stone gray finish on the blade. We're going 1/4 of an inch thick with a really nice taper down there. Kind of a mix between a cleaver and a tonto, I'd say. Awesome little knife. It's going to have a Kydex sheath to go with it, so we're going to do some Kydex work. We're going to do a bunch of hand forging, and well, let's just jump right into it. So again, here's a knife, and I've got a bar of W2. 1/4 of an inch thick. I would say W2 is probably my favorite steel to work with, not only because I can put a Hamon line on it, but it tends to have a really good durability. It's tool steel. I can make knives. I can see a lot of wear and a lot of usage and really be hammered on without any issues, and I can get a really nice fine edge. So we're going to work with this, and the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and get my shape drawn out on this W2 steel, and we're going to cut these big, I don't know, I guess if you call that the choil or not. I'm going to say it's the choil. If you're a knife guy in the comments, correct me if I'm wrong. But we're going to go in this big choil here, and then this little bit of the handle. We're going to go ahead and cut that out so it's a little bit easier to forge out on the horn of my anvil, and it's not going to take me absolutely ages to do. So just little shortcuts here and there. So just scribing this out here real quick, I'm going to kind of line it up so I know what length I need to be at. Make a little mark here. So that's going to be my total length right there. And then just draw this handle kind of rough. Again, all I'm really trying to do right here, right now, is get these big handle grooves cut out. So there's that, and I'll get my angle here at the top, and I'm not actually going to cut this at the top here because I want to actually forge that out. As you can see on the drawing here, we have a little bit of a curve out right here at the top. So I'm going to do that in the forge work rather than grind that with a grinder, just because it's going to look nicer, it'll be a little bit easier, and I try and do as much hand forging as I possibly can. Not that there's anything wrong with stock removal, but I prefer hand forged. So that's going to have a nice little turn right there. So let's go ahead and we'll just make some cuts, cut out some of this material here, again make it a little bit easier to forge out. So I'm going to scribe some lines here where I'm going to cut with my grinder. And normally when I'm doing something like this, where you can't really get a good angle with the angle grinder, you just grind some straight lines down, and then that makes the material a lot easier to go back through with at an angle, take out all your little pieces. So let's get to it. Plugged in the wrong thing. There we go. Alright, rock and roll. Now we're going to go over the grinder, cut all the way down through, and then start So now that I have all those cut out, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to throw it on my bench grinder here, clean that up, get all of those little grooves and divots out of there, because if we try and forge that as is, we're going to get a bunch of what's called cold shuts, where the steel isn't welded together but it's closed, and that's not good at all. No bueno. So we're going to grind all that clean real quick. So there's those cleaned up really nice. We can hop over to the forge. So here is my new forge. Got a little bit of limited space here, but I'm making things work. I really wanted to build sort of a Japanese style forge with the airflow on the side rather than from the bottom. Just because of my Okinawan lineage, I've always wanted a Japanese style forge, and I decided I'd mess around with this a bit. I also was able to acquire some hand crank blowers here, which this thing puts out a lot of air. It's really nice. Don't need electricity, although I do have my little electric blower hooked up here as well, just in case, and I can keep things going while I'm working on the steel. But this also helps me filming these videos for you guys, so you don't have this horrible, noisy, annoying electric blower going when I'm trying to get work done. So let's fire her up and get hammering. Now we're going to start working that bevel. Being careful not to bevel over our choil here. Working it, get it as soon as I can. So there's the shape that we're trying to get to. There's our blade. She's really big, so we're just gonna, oh, burn the drawing, yay! I've done that a couple times. It's fine, I got plenty of more. So we gotta get to that shape, and I've already got that nice curve going on right there at the blade. And so I think I'm just going to flatten everything out, get everything nice and even. I got that bevel about where I want it. It's actually pretty damn even already. Just flatten everything out a little bit. I've got that nice little back curve that I want. And I'm not actually going to sever this handle with my hot cut tool, because I want everything to be really, really nice and smooth. And if I try and cut it with a hot cut tool, it's going to give me issues and I'm going to have to grind stuff out. And this is a blade that's not supposed to look rugged and hand forged. So we want everything nice and flat and flush and clean. Straightening everything out. I don't know if you can see the edge. Let me see if I can get the camera here. You can see that. I got a little bit of a wiggle right there at the end. That's about it. See how straight it is there. So again, that's basically, yeah, that's our shape. That's what we're looking for. So I'm just going to stick her back in the forge before my fire dies here. Let her come up to temperature and then slow down, cool down nice and slow for a couple hours to anneal the blade, make it easier to grind on. Alright, so I have my knife here that's been annealed. And I went ahead and shaped the little handle grooves here a little bit, cleaned those up. I also cleaned up the edge of the blade here and the spine, kind of just giving a nice profile here. And I reached out to the customer and asked him about measurements, since currently we're sitting at 6 3/4 inches total, and the order was for 5 3/4 inches. And we have decided that we are going to keep with the original measurements, keep this as a really nice small stubby EDC blade, so we're going to have to cut off that much material off of the end. Then we're also going to stick her back in the forge and get this handle curved down a little bit more. You can see I have here my photo. So we're going to curve that down a little bit more. And when everything is said and done, this is what she should hopefully look like. And those are all our new measurements. We're also adding a little lanyard hole to the back of the tang there. And there'll be some nice jimping on the spine. So, first thing is first, we shall go ahead and cut off the little bit of extra material we have here on the blade. Alright, it's day 3 working on the knife, and I let her sit all night and anneal in the propane forge. Now I find usually I can get a knife to anneal better in the coal forge than in the propane forge. Even when I close the propane forge up all the way, it seems like enough heat escapes, and you want the knife to be cooling down as slowly as absolutely possible. So if you're a fellow knife maker out there and you've got a coal forge, bring it up to temperature in the coal forge and let it anneal by just cooling in the coal forge as the coals cool down as well. And that'll give you a much better anneal. Your steel will be a lot softer, a lot easier to work with. Now, the next step I got to do before I trim this down to the exact measurements, I'm really close. I've just got to trim about 1/8 of an inch or so off the front and a tiny bit off the back and shape that handle up. But before I do any of that, I'm going to ground this bad boy clean, and before I do that, I gotta clean off all of this forge scale. So if you didn't see my last video, all of this crap that's on the blade from it being in the forge is called forge scale. That's kind of an accumulation of all the stuff, all the impurities and all the crap in the steel that ends up burning out as it gets heated, and also oxidization of oxygen in the forge. Propane, a lot more oxygen in the propane forge than in the coal forge. You get a lot more forge scale. And what we really want to do is we want to clean all that crap off with my wire wheel before I bring it over to my belt grinder, because forge scale tends to break down my ceramic belts really, really fast, and belts are stupid expensive, and we don't want to break those down. So we're going to quickly clean all this off with the wire wheel, and then jump right over to a 36 grit on my belt and just clean all the surfaces up, and then I'll see what we're working with. Alright, so I've got her polished nice and flat. As you can see, I haven't done the bevel yet. I'm going to go ahead and drill the holes for the handle first, and then I'm going to switch over to a fresh 36 grit belt for working on this nice tall bevel. And we're also going to have to do this little side bevel here and a little bit of a back bevel. So basically just go really nice and slow, and I'll show you everything we're doing when we get to that. So there's our holes drilled, and we'll just go on and work on the main bevel here, nice and slow. That edge before you transfer over and do your nice tall bevel. Just make sure everything is nice and even, and then transfer over and do your full tall. So there's that bevel. I've got her all the way to 60 grit right now. So the next thing we got to do is grind our edge here and our edge here. You can see on the drawing, we're going to grind this here on the top, both of these little bevels here. So we're going to go nice and slow, go back to a 36 grit belt. I'm going to go with one of my more worn down belts, just gives me a little bit more control, and go carefully and get those in there. About as thin as I want to go on the 36 grit. We're going to switch over to a 60 to finish that up nice. But before we do that, we're going to do this little back bevel here. So to make sure that we're even when we go for our top bevel here, we're going to come in about to there. Try and angle it if I can. Get that nice little angled plunge line. And then so I will mark the spine here and transfer that little mark over here. Do that angled bevel. And there we go. That matches up on both sides, so we make sure that everything matches up on both sides. Now we can go ahead and grind that in. Again, get a good angle, nice and slow and steady. Try and do the whole thing without dunking it in the wall. That's pretty even. I'm happy with that. So there's the final profile, all set and ready to go. I messaged the client and everything looks good to him. So we're going to go ahead and heat treat the knife. So for heat treating, I'm going to throw it in my forge, bring it up to temperature, let it sit for a little while so everything can become nice and homogenized on a molecular basis. And then after I quench it in oil and it's nice and hard, I'll throw up my tempering oven at between 350 and 400 for an hour and do that 2 times. And then we'll work on throwing some handle scales on her. Here's the knife, hardened and tempered. I completely forgot to put this jimping in on the top, so I just went ahead and did that real quick. I have her polished up to 400 grit on my sanding belts, and then I hit her on my buffing wheel to take her up to about 800 grit. Eventually, she's going to get dunked in acid because Eddie wants a nice gray stone wash finish on this knife, which is going to look absolutely awesome. But before we get to that, I want to work on getting my handle scales cut out, just in case I put any scratches or anything in the blade while I'm working with it. I don't have to worry about dipping it in acid again. All I have to do is polish it up again real quick. So, a little bit easier, a little bit quicker. So I've got my 2 handle scales here. We are going with a black micarta. And I'm going to go ahead and tape these together real quick. So when I go to drill my holes, I don't have to do the whole process twice. I only have to do it once and drill 1 set of holes. So there's our handle scales taped up, so I only have to drill my holes once instead of twice. So we'll jump over to my mill drill press, get everything taken care of. So this is how I cut my finger really bad, and I highly recommend you don't do this, especially if you have a sharp blade, but this blade is dull, doesn't have an edge on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the knife down here so I can drill my second hole. Don't do this yourself at home, you will cut yourself, but I'm going to go very slow, and I have to do this. And all I'm going to do is just start this hole. Pull the knife off, and then I can finish it. Again, that's how I cut my finger really well, so don't do that unless you really absolutely have to, but never ever ever with a sharp blade. This is a dull blade, so worst case scenario, if it spins on me, it'll catch on here, but if it does spin on me and gets loose, it's not sharp, so it can't cut me. Will still hurt though. So now that I have those 2 holes drilled and I have my pins set in there to hold the knife in place where it's going to sit, I'm going to just trace out my handle here real quick. Then, because of how we're going to be doing this handle, I'm going to scribe this hole, but I don't actually need to drill it on this handle, because what we're going to do is we're actually going to do a little cutout on the handle to reveal that lanyard hole. Then I'm going to do the front of the handle here. And now we'll go ahead and cut that out on the bandsaw. So I have my handle scales cut out, and I put the little bevel here for the cutout. And we're going to be using these little screw rivets for this knife. And these just pop in the handle. And I've got the little backing piece which goes on the other side. And everything just screws together and holds the knife in place. So what I ended up having to do on this handle is actually drill a secondary hole almost all the way through, but not quite all the way through. So the head of my screw rivets will fit in there nice, but not go all the way through. So it can actually grab those handle scales and torque everything down. So there's those little screw rivets. Now before I glue the handle scales onto the knife, like I said, we're going to give this knife a nice acid wash stone gray finish. So I've got my ferric chloride here. I'm just going to dip the knife in for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then I'm going to have to clean this off and dip the back of it as well, since the back of the knife is going to be exposed. You can see we're starting to get a nice gray color on that knife there. I think I'm going to dip it one more time here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm going to go ahead and clean that off. Clean all that acid off of there, and then use my heavy duty rubbing compound number 7 to clean all the oxides off the blade, just like I was going to do a Hamon line, but instead we're doing our nice gray finish. So I put the handle scales on with these really annoying little screw rivets in there, and there's no epoxy. I just have the screw rivets right now, and the reason for that is so once I form and shape this handle, I can pop these scales off nice and easy, do one more acid etch on the knife so I get the spine and the bottom of it the same amount, and everything looks nice and even and pretty. So I'm going to go ahead and shape this handle. Alright, so I have the handle all nice and polished and shiny. But before I pop these handle scales off, give her the final acid bath, and then epoxy everything back together, we are going to put a little bit of a texture in the handle. So this is what the customer wants. And that not only gives a little bit of extra grip to your handle, but also is very aesthetically pleasing. Gives a little bit of a texture to it. So I'm not entirely sure how I'm going to do that yet. Most people do that on their sanding belt. They have a smaller diameter wheel on the sanding belt, which they use to put those grooves in there. I don't have that. However, I do have a series of sanding cylinders, which I should be able to find one the right diameter and just grind those grooves in there and then hand sand everything to about 400 or 600 grit. And then buff it again on my buffing wheel and glue everything together. So let's hop into it. So this is what I figured out. I got my little sanding cylinder here on my drill press, and I've got my speed up nice and high on the drill press. I took the handle scales off just so if I grind too much out of there, I don't grind the top of my rivets. And we're just going to give this a try. There we go. I'm just going to refine those grooves a bit, make a few of them a little bit deeper, and then do the other one, and sand everything down by hand with sandpaper. Alright, so I've got those handle scales glued on. Beautiful gray stone finish on the knife all the way around. Nice and beautiful. And the next thing that we've got to do is make the Kydex sheath. So I have my little cutout here, just like I would with leather. And this is going to fold over. And basically we're going to try our best to recreate the Kydex sheath in this photo here. And I've got some awesome nylon flat webbing here for our little belt straps there. And this is going to be a cross straw sheath for the left hand side with a right hand side draw. So the first step that I got to do is take my Kydex cutout here, throw it in my little toaster oven on about 200 degrees, and just let it sit and warm up. Now, when you're doing Kydex, you want to make sure you keep an eye on it. If it gets too hot, you completely ruin the Kydex. So you want it warm enough that it'll bend and fold, but not so hot that it starts to become almost sticky, and you'll completely ruin the Kydex. So we want this to be our outside, and this to be our inside. So when I go to fold it, I just got to make sure I take my time, make sure it's the right direction, place my knife down in the center, and fold everything over. So what I'm going to do once that's warmed up is set my piece of Kydex down on this hard foam, Place my knife on top of it, and then I've got a piece of squishier, softer foam, and I just press that over top, press everything down, and that'll form the Kydex to my knife. I can then go through with my hot air gun and touch up any areas that need to get pushed or pinched tighter. And we just want to make sure that everything's nice and closed. We have a nice tight edge all the way around. And that usually takes a couple seconds to do. So once I have that sheet of Kydex over here, I'll kind of show you that whole process, and you'll see how we do all that. I am not in any way, shape, or form a professional Kydex sheath maker. I've only made about a dozen or so far, and I try to get better with every one, just like everything in life. But generally speaking, this is kind of how you do Kydex at home without any professional equipment. One day I might actually get a professional Kydex press, but those things are a little expensive. They're like $200 to $500 for a really nice one. So in the meantime, this is just what you can do at home. Nice and simple, straightforward, down and dirty, but make a really nice Kydex sheath that turns out awesome. Alright, it's been about 30 seconds in the oven, and even from cold, the Kydex is already ready to go. Like I said, you want to keep an eye on it, make sure it doesn't burn. It does heat up quite fast. So I'm just going to fold this over without burning myself here. Line everything up nice. Press down with my foam. And then I'm going to grab another piece of foam here so I can keep pressure right here on the edge, and I can form that handle. So we're just going to press everything down, and I'm going to speed this video up here a little bit as we wait. Alright, so that should be cool enough for me to handle. Everything's starting to solidify, which is good. Like I said, eventually I'll go back through with my heat gun and pinch some things tight that need to get pinched tight. But for now, that is our rough Kydex sheath. And knife should slide in and out nice. Yep, and it locks in there good, which I like. I don't want that to fall out, although it will be carried on the side, so you don't really have to worry about that as much. But I like a good lock where the knife kind of pulls in and out nice. So, next step, if we go back over to our image here. So the knife in this image has a rounded tip, so they have the sheath designed there for a rounded tip. But since we have a nice square flat tip, we're going to keep things nice and square and flat. So I'm going to push my knife back in there. And I know where my little rivets go, because I can kind of see the rough outline of the blade here. So if that's going to stick in like there, I can mark with my chalk so we can see it. And we'll put a nice curved edge here on the sheath. And then the back just needs a little tiny bit of a trim. Just kind of follow the shape of that knife. And then we're going to be putting Kydex rivets. And if we look right here, where that knife is going to go in and out, I want to hold it about halfway in so I can see exactly where that's going to need to get pinched with a rivet. And I don't want to go too far in because then I got to redo the whole thing because the knife won't fit. So that's the best way to kind of figure out where that first rivet's going to go. And then after that, you can use a ruler to map out where the rest of your rivets are going to go. And for our rivets, I have these. These are really awesome. It's just a one-part rivet system. You drill or punch a hole in your Kydex or your leather for the rivet. Then you stick it in there. And then it comes with a little stand here where the rivet sits on top of. And then I've got my little punch. and that goes on the top, and you hit that down with the hammer, and that kind of flattens and squishes out the rivet. So I will try and show you guys one or two of those as best I can, but I'm going to go ahead and do this sheath up really nice. So that's how those look. So now I'm going to use a ruler, make sure I evenly space them all the way down, and then up the side as well. So I have those rivets in there, and as you can see I didn't do the bottom yet, and the reason for that is we're going to be using our nylon webbing to go all the way around for our belt loops. Now, the biggest mistake that I've made in the past when I'm working with either Kydex sheaths or leather sheaths, whether you're doing cross draw or vertical draw, is making the belt loop too small. Now, typically, now I make sure that my belt loops are able to support belts between 1 inch and 1.5 inches, since that's kind of an industry standard. However, there are a lot of guys that have the big, thick, 2-inch wide belts. So I messaged Eddie and made sure what size of a belt he's going to be wearing this on, and he said it's a 2-inch wide belt. So good thing I checked, otherwise I definitely would have made this too small. So you always want to make sure that you're making your belt loops the right size, and the best way that you can do that, if you don't already have a template for doing belt loops, is to just take a chunk of wood, get it to the right width, in this case the 2 inches, and then so now when I am cutting out my webbing, I can make sure that I have enough so that that belt is going to sit in there nice. So the way that this is going to work is it's going to be left side draw, so the belt's going to sit on this side, and because I have this wood block, I can also tell how it's going to sit out a little bit from the side of the sheath because of the handle there. So I can account for that and make sure I have enough material here. So the webbing's going to come down and be pinned in place with rivets right along the end there. And then it's going to be stretched all the way around the back, down the side, so it meets up. So with that block, make sure I have enough material. I'm going to give myself a little bit of extra material so I have a little bit of wiggle room. Just score this with the chalk where I'm going to cut it. And grab my handy dandy scissors. Cut that out. And I haven't really used this webbing a ton yet. And I can't cut it with those scissors apparently. So I'm just going to use my leather knife here. There we go. That was easier. And I haven't used this a lot, but what I've found so far is it likes to fray, so I just take my lighter and just burn the ends, just like you're working with paracord, just so it doesn't fray, or any kind of a multi-strand cord, just so it doesn't fray while I'm working with it, and then I lose too much material and I don't have enough. So now that I have this band here, I'm just going to double check it again. I'm going to pinch it nice and tight at the bottom where it's going to be. Take the other side, line it up, pinch it tight, and then make sure my wood belt here is able to slide through, which again, leather belt, it's going to be thinner. It's 1/8 of an inch thick. This is a little bit thicker, so I got to work with it a little bit here. But essentially, I have definitely enough material for that belt to sit in there and go through. So now that I know how big of a belt I need, we're going to be doing 2 of them. So I just take my webbing here, line that up, and then cut out my second piece. Same deal again. Take the lighter, burn the end so it doesn't fray. And then I'm going to take my Kydex sheath here, mix up some 5-minute epoxy, put my webbing down on there, and I'm just going to take a clamp and pinch everything tight, wait for that glue to dry, and then I'm going to drill holes for some rivets. I'm not sure what I'm going to use yet. Hopefully I'm going to use these. I'm not sure if they're going to be long enough or not to go through all the material, but we'll see. If not, I've got some other options, but this is the goal, to hopefully use 2 of these in each piece of webbing, and if everything works out great, it should look something like that, but with Kydex instead of the leather. This is one that I'm working on right now. I've got this awesome knife that I finished, razor sharp, and this will be up on my store for as long as until it sells, obviously. But some awesome acrylic on that handle. Super happy with this one. And this is a cross straw as well. And that just sits in there nice. So basically the Kydex and this knife will be the same thing as this, but with Kydex. So I'm going to glue all this together, and I'll be right back with you. So there we have it, all glued up. Now I'm just going to trim off the little bit of extra material here at the bottom. I'll take that over to the grinder, clean up that edge. So now to put those rivets in there. So there you have it. And the last step for this sheath, before I put my fettle edge on the knife, I'll stick the knife in there, make sure she fits. And then I'm going to heat up the back of the handle here and just fold that back a little bit like the picture. So there you have it. Nice little lip on the top there. It's an awesome little accent piece. Gives the whole thing a little bit of character. So I'm going to go ahead and do the last step, which is to put an edge on the knife here. So I will get back to you with the sharpness test and the final product reveal. Oh yeah, she's shaving sharp. See if I can even go this way. Oh yeah, I can go against the grain. I think I'll strap her off once more. But in the meantime, here's some glamour shots. Thanks for watching till the end. If you liked this video, why don't you go ahead and hit that like button down below. And if you're not already subscribed for some stupid reason, well, why don't you go ahead and hit that big subscribe button as well. Links in the description below to my Instagram, Facebook, Etsy, and website. If you want to see some more behind the scenes stuff here at the Forge, best place for that is my Instagram or my Facebook. And if you want to see all the awesome knives I have up for sale, well, you can find everything I have over on Etsy or on my website, www.therainy4thblacksmithy.com. And if you'd like something custom ordered, well, why don't you just reach out to me directly. Thanks again for watching. Until next time, keep on keeping on.